Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. Welcome to our webinar, Workout Shoes, the What, the When, the Why. Presenting for us this evening is Ramon Sodano from UREC. I know most of you probably already know him. I'll let him introduce himself in a minute. So if you have any technical difficulties, please feel free to let me know. Write it in the chat box. And if you have any questions throughout the presentation, just leave them in the chat box. We'll be taking Q&A at the end. And yeah, I'm just going to pass it over to Ramon.
Well, thank you. As Andrea was saying, my name is Ramon Sodano. I am the coordinator of fitness services and strength and conditioning at Washington State University's Rec Center. So oversee the personal training, strength and conditioning, weight room, small group training departments, as well as the Wellbeing Online. And that's where I get to interact with all you fabulous global campus students giving these webinars and stuff. This is the first time I'm doing a webinar from my house, since, you know, not only are we dealing with COVID, but we're also dealing with all the smoke in Pullman, so we're not able to go into work right now. So we're going to be doing this from my little homemade gym that I have here, and I busted out a bunch of the shoes that I currently have. And we'll talk about some other ones because I don't have like the maximalist, long distance running shoes and stuff, but we'll kind of talk about those as well. So what we're going to talk about today is essentially, we're not going to go down super weeds, and I should front load this with, by no means am I an expert about shoes. I do have a good understanding about the arthrokinematics of the foot. I understand what shoes are used for and stuff, but when it comes to, like, if you are an experienced like triathlete or marathon runner, or you are a certain type of athlete that, you know, requires a certain type of shoe, I would always recommend to go to the different stores where they can do a gait analysis on you. They can, you know, look at your foot, possibly even take a mold of your foot and build the proper, you know, arches and all the different inserts and soles for it. Identify if you overly pronate, if you overly evert, those kinds of things, and they can help develop a shoe perfect for you if it is your sport, right? So there's definitely rabbit holes with this whole subject that you can go down very, very deep. But we're going to kind of touch the surface level of all these different types of shoes, what they're used for, what some of the drawbacks of them are, and then just kind of some basic things about the foot itself and kind of like where this whole concept of shoes really came from. With the ones that I don't have like in front of me, I'll bring up some pictures online, so I'll share the screen and we'll talk about those really quickly. And then if at any time you have questions come up, we'll answer questions at the end, but if you just want to throw them in the chat, Andrea's going to be taking them down, so don't feel like you have to hold it and might forget it. Just throw it in the chat and we'll get to it at the end. So with that, we'll just kind of dive into some of these concepts about shoes. So why did we even really start to develop shoes, you know, when we came across this whole concept? And really back then it was, you know, warmth and comfort to make sure that, you know, we're not, you know, hurting our feet, we're keeping them warm, that, you know, we're not dealing with frostbite and those kinds of things. And that's really where the concept of shoes came from. And then it's obviously accelerated into this huge multi-billion-dollar business for style, fashion, sports, performance, and all those kinds of things, right? And what has kind of happened is, due to especially some of the fashion senses of shoes and these new constructed workout shoes, is we've lost the ability of the foot to do what the foot is supposed to do. So how I explain the consistent wearing of shoes to people is, if you ever had a cast on your arm for like a couple of weeks, or on your leg for a couple of weeks, what happens to the muscles in that arm or in that leg just after a couple of weeks? They completely atrophy. They're no longer being utilized. The body sees that they're not being used, so it's like, I don't need to use this. I'm going to conserve this energy and force it elsewhere where I'm using it. And that's kind of what happens when you're in shoes, right? A shoe is like a cast for your foot. You're not using all the small little digits and textures and moving your feet how they really were meant to be utilized, because it's in this compact, really rigid kind of surface where it doesn't have a lot of free range. And that's not to take anything away from shoes, right? Like, shoes are, it makes it much easier walking from point A to point B, but we spend a lot of time in shoes, and I would argue too much time in our shoes. I'll front load this with two, that in my opinion, you should spend as much time barefoot as possible when it is like, well, one, not gross, right? When it is feasible to do so, when you're just hanging around in your house and when you're at home, try to be as barefoot as often as possible. If you have the ability to work out barefoot, Do it as much as you can before, but don't overtrain with it. Start to adjust to it and those kinds of things, right? If you have that ability, some gyms, like we require you that you wear shoes. So then I would recommend kind of like the minimalist kind of shoe, right? Where you can get as much of that real foot feeling as you possibly can, okay? If you even think about it, when we were persistence hunters back in the day, when we were hunting down mammoths and all kinds of different animals, the human being was considered a persistence hunter because we had such a good cardiovascular system that we could outrun these animals and they would get so exhausted, then we would be able to team up on them and hunt them. And when we were doing this barefoot, right, which had, it developed a certain structure of our foot to be a shock absorber and developed a certain technique for us to run in. What has happened with a lot of these running shoes these days is they've developed these real protective mechanisms to make it more comfy when you're running and make it less painful from, like, you know, the onset of you compacting in the ground, but it's changed our gait to be able to have our form change in a way that is not conducive to the actual proper mechanics that our body has utilized for millennia when it comes to foot strike on the ground and those kinds of things. So those are some of the takebacks, you know, or some of the drawbacks with shoes in general, right? That you're not getting to use your feet and all little small stabilizers and intricate muscles within there, as you know, we should. Like, if you look at a lot of people's feet, their toes are just smashed together, right? They're even sometimes overlapping on one another. Your toes are supposed to be splayed out. They're supposed to almost be like a second set of hands, right? So you see that over time, we're just really smashing your toes. We're collapsing our arches where we don't have a good shock absorber anymore. And then a lot of times as well, like with these big thick heels in our running shoes, is now we have this ability to heel strike when we run. And that's not the proper mechanics that you actually want when you're doing a long jog, right? Or running in general, because that puts a lot of different stress on joints in the body where it wasn't intended to happen. And I was actually a prime example of that. I have what's called grade 4 chondromalacia in both my knees now. So I have complete degeneration of the articular cartilage in both of my knees. And it's because I was always wearing like big Nike Shocks and stuff back in the day, which were like, you know, marketed to be these great workout shoes. And I was running anywhere from 5 to 8 miles every day or every other day. And over time, because I was taught back then, and the foot mechanics of the shoe would naturally have you heel strike, and that's what we taught people way back in the day of proper running mechanics if you weren't an actual runner, right? Actual runners knew what to do. That had just completely destroyed my knees. And that's kind of when I went down the rabbit hole of learning about shoes, learning about proper foot mechanics and how to go through different types of workouts and how that can be optimized, okay? However, with shoes, you do want this big cushion sometimes, right? You definitely want it for the fact that when you are doing like these intense long runs, or even a thicker one, like in the Maximalist shoes, because it does feel better. It's not as painful on the foot. It is a shock absorber, but it's definitely not how your foot is meant to work. So while you may use them as a tool for something, it doesn't mean that that's what you want to be in all the time. So you have to think of the shoes as a tool, and they're meant to be used for different aspects. And definitely be as barefoot as possible, as much as possible. Let your feet out, right? I know a lot of individuals that they're in food. I had this situation too, where I was in shoes so often that, like, if I ever took my socks off in a matter, like, I remember I started doing jiu-jitsu again, my feet would get so dry right away. That's not supposed to happen. We need to let our feet out and breathe and be out there. So what we'll do now is we'll go through, I guess it looks like I set these up to be kind of smallest to biggest, and then a little bit of specialty kind of stuff. So we'll kind of go through and we'll talk about each one of these, and like we said, you know, what they are, when to use them, and why to use them in that way. So you know what, actually let's not go in this order. We're going to do it like this. We're going to start, and this is not a great running shoe example. I'm not a big long distance runner anymore. Like I said, I have no cartilage in my knees, but this is my best example at my house that I have of a running shoe. And then I'll bring up a picture of one of those intense maximalist running shoes that a lot of individuals are able to put a lot more miles on using like those big Brooks and other shoes that have those huge thick soles. I mean, Brooks also makes good minimalists, but they also make these intense maximalists as well. So what you see with a shoe like this is you have a lot of stability and a lot of support around it, right? And what you see is you have this big, thick heel, right? Even if I set this down, you can see that that heel is already up and off the ground. What this does is it's creating an elevated heel, right? Which makes it takes a lot of stress off the Achilles and takes a lot of stress off the calf, right? Which is nice when we're running. A lot of people end up now heel striking with this because they feel that they get a little bit more of a shock absorber. And if you ever just try to go outside one day barefoot and just run and see what your feet, how they actually fall, and that's pretty much what your proper foot mechanics want to look like. When you put your foot in a shoe, it totally changes the mechanics that you can utilize, because now heel striking doesn't hurt nearly as bad as it used to, okay? Granted, this is good though, for the fact that if I am going to do a lot of long distance running, I want that protection for my feet, because we're not naturally running all the time. And we've also kept so long in these shoes that we've kind of de-evolved the stability and the strength of our feet, right? So one thing that happened, I'll actually talk about that when we get to the minimalists here in a little bit, because it's an interesting story about those 5-finger shoes and how they got in trouble. But you see this thick heel, right? You see a lot of stability, a good sole, right? These are a little bit more flexible at the top, right? And you have a mid kind of ankle support that helps support that ankle a little bit. It's not a very high ankle support. Most running shoes aren't going to have a high ankle support. This is honestly, Nike would consider that it's more of a cross-training shoe, but it's the closest thing I have to a long-distance running shoe. So what we're seeing for these is you have a good cushion to be able to do those long runs, right? It's not going to hurt the bottom of the foot when you're going for a long period of time. It's usually anywhere from like what we call there's something that we call the heel to toe drop, and that's how high the heel is to the toe drop. This one's probably anywhere from an 8 to a 10 millimeter heel to toe drop, so we're elevating that heel up. And again, that takes that stress off the Achilles and off the calf, so you're able to kind of like go for longer periods of time. But it's important for you to understand that you need to go learn the proper running mechanics and not divert to what these kind of shoes allow you to do with your running mechanics when you are doing that kind of long distance running. So when you are utilizing a running shoe, you should try not to revert to this hardcore heel slap each time you're on the ground, but still use a good proper foot strike in these shoes, and it'll definitely help your times. It'll help increase your distance and all that. And that's one thing with these running shoes with the big thick soles is what we have seen, or the ones that have like metal like plates and stuff in them, is that you are absolutely able to increase time and increase distance because of the comfort that it has. But you have to remember, again, it's a tool. So you don't want to be wearing it all the time. Another thing that they've seen in the research with shoes with the big thick soles is the force that you're actually putting into the ground is much greater, and that's because you're able to impact the ground more and more. While it will feel decent on the foot, and like, oh, I can strike harder and my foot's not hurting, that going up the kinetic chain, as it did for myself, can definitely have a lot of detrimental causes to the knees. So when you are using, your running shoes, it's not like the ones that you should be wearing all day, every single day. Again, I'm going to say it multiple times throughout this whole webinar, you should definitely try to be as barefoot as often as possible, okay? But they are a good tool for when you are going out and you're going running. Some will have a little bit more stability, some will have a little bit less. They'll usually have a big, flatter bottom, so you're not rolling all over the place, right? So definitely good for when you're on the trail or when you're on the cement and those kinds of things, right? I'm just gonna bring up a picture of one of these maximalist shoes that we have out here now, which are getting a lot of, I can't even see my screen, it's so far away. Give me 1 second. Huh. Well, it looks like I don't have that up anymore. Oh yeah, I do, I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Here we go. So this is an example of some of those maximalist shoes where we have a huge thick sole. You can see there's other ones that are showing around here. These are kind of the extremes, but they're definitely out there. And a lot of people are using these quite often in their long distance running. Again, this is not naturally how the foot sits on the ground. Obviously, if you put your foot on the ground, you see that it's not going to be sitting in such a way. However, when it does come to these long distance running, a lot of people like these and are having some benefit from them. It's not something that I would typically recommend. I also don't have that much experience using them because I'm not a huge long distance runner, but that is an example, or like a gross example of one of those maximalist shoes, right? So this has a little bit less of a, that thick cushion. There's ones that are in between, and there's ones that are very, very, very large. Okay. So your cross trainer shoes are a little bit the in-between of a running shoe and like a minimalist. There's a lot out there like your Metcons and other the Reeboks that are out there. I'm spacing on them, the Nanos and stuff. They usually have a little bit smaller of a heel to toe drop. I don't have my Nanos on me right now. I don't know where they're at. Oh, they're in my office. They're similar to this, but they're a little bit more functional. They're a little bit more flat and sturdy to the ground. But with this, we're going to transfer over to our minimalist shoes, okay? So these are the shoes that are extremely flexible and they really conform to your foot. So this is my typical everyday training shoe. So it's a Vivo Barefoot shoe, okay? This has a 0 heel to toe, 0 millimeter toe to, or heel to toe drop, right? It's completely flat to the ground. It is extremely lightweight. It's extremely flexible, and it's the one step. It's a quarter step above the 5-finger shoes, right? Those the 5-toe Vibram shoes. I absolutely hate the look of the Vibram shoes. They drive me crazy, but I understand the mechanics behind them. So the reason to have shoes like this, as also you can see a very short ankle support, right? So there is no ankle support, right? So you're learning how to use the ankle itself. They do have a sturdy bottom, right? It's a little less wide, but essentially what this is it's a step up from having your foot on the ground and just having a little bit of protection to be able to go against what's underneath your foot, hitting pebbles and rocks and those kinds of things that may hurt a little bit, right? And they form, and what it has here too is what's called a very large toe box. So it's a thin shoe that widens out at the toe, and that's to allow your feet, like your toes, to splay out, right? Again, we don't want our toes super smashed together. We want them to be able to splay out and really get all that grip on the ground as possible, right? You also try that. Sometimes just be barefoot, and a good workout every single day is just stand up and then just grip the ground back and forth with your feet 100 times, and I promise you, you'll be very surprised at how tired your feet get very quickly because of how weak our feet have become from being in shoes all the time. So this is a great way, and again, these are a drawback to these is you look silly when you wear them. They look like little kung fu or ballerina slippers, right? But they're very, very mechanical for the body. They are what I use in the gym for weight, well, not necessarily Olympic weightlifting, but my typical, like, you know, doing around mobility stuff, walking around consistently. I wear these around all the time, honestly. I try to be in these as much as possible. They're just not very fashionable. My basic workouts, my deadlifts, all that kind of stuff I'm going to be doing in these as well, because I mean, most people really prefer to deadlift, you know, barefoot. We're not allowed to have barefoot at the rec center, and that's again, we want to create all that strength from, you know, the ground up using our feet. They're very flexible with your foot to be able to move in all the different ways, and you are having to support yourself. These are not stable at all. You're teaching yourself to be able to stabilize your foot and to be able to stabilize your ankle. An analogy to give you is in weightlifting or like just resistance training in the gym is when we start seeing people that are going to be lifting, say they're going to back squat starting to go above 90% of their 1 rep max. They start to wear a belt, right? It acts as a synthetic core that supports the rigidity of the spine and acts as an extra support, right? However, we don't want that person training with that belt all the time, because then they become reliant on that belt, and all the small little musculature next to their spine that's meant to support or meant to react when some sort of stimulus happens to the body, that stuff won't turn on, and that's when injury can happen, right? So if you see an individual is consistently, like they're doing bicep curls in their belt and stuff, like they're not doing themselves a service at all. They're doing themselves a disservice. And the same thing goes if you're consistently always wearing shoes all the time, or big, thick shoes, where you don't get that good movement of the foot, where you yourself have to learn how to support it. The minimalist shoes can be used for running, and they can be used for long distance running. However, this is I'm sure some of you have heard the 5-finger shoes got in trouble a couple of years back. They actually got sued because a lot of people got injured when they started running like 5 miles, 10 miles, right when they got their 5-finger shoes. Well, it's an easy reason to understand why that happened. They went from wearing something that was huge and like a cast to something that was completely unsupportive, that their feet had, it's like they were running barefoot and they just started going out for super long runs because it wasn't hurting the bottom of their foot because they have this rubber sole. So not only were they probably using incorrect strike mechanics because they were used to a different, thicker kind of shoe, they were also not used to having all the small little stabilizers being turned on in the foot because they haven't trained with it. So if you are going to start transitioning from going from, you know, a thicker shoe, a more stable shoe, a more cushioned shoe to a more minimalist of a shoe, you need to slowly ramp it up. You're not going to just dive into the deep end right away. It's going to take, think about again, when you take that cast off your arm, all that muscle is atrophied, and it takes a couple months for it to build back up, and it takes maybe a year for it to even feel normal again. Now imagine having that for damn near your entire life. You get some 5-finger shoes, and all of a sudden you decide you're going to run 10 miles. The foot is not ready for it. The strike mechanics are not ready for it. So I try to train in these as much as possible. I mean, everything from back squats, deadlifts, all my kettlebell work, all that kind of stuff. If I could be barefoot in the gym, I would. At my house when I work out, I'm always barefoot. It's the best way to kind of go about it. Again, you're strengthening you may not be able to lift as much weight, but you're getting more bang for your buck because you're using your body more how it's supposed to, okay? Again, don't overtrain with them right when you get there. And again, some of the drawbacks, you know, if you rush into it, it could hurt. Definitely not fashionable if you ever see it. These were the coolest ones I could possibly find. And they're still like, even when I wear them, it's like, I look silly. They do look like ballerina slippers. It's kind of funny. Nice and light though, can move around real easy. These ones are pretty grippy. A cool thing about Vivo or Vivo, I'm not sure actually how you say it, or the Vivo Barefoot shoes, is they also have a lot of minimalist shoes that are developed for trail running or for long distance running. So they're going to have a little bit higher of that heel, or it's going to continue to have a 0 heel drop, but just more cushion underneath, which I'll explain with these high leap shoes here in a second. But yeah, I would highly recommend, if you are an avid exerciser, to start moving towards the minimalist fashion. There is definitely Nike minimalists and all that kind of stuff out there, but what you're going to start seeing with those is they try to keep the fashion with it, which I totally get, and they'll have a bit thicker of a bottom, which is just, it's not the natural way the foot works. If you are okay to get to this point where you're fine with getting a shoe that can literally roll up on itself because it's so flexible and small and light, it's the best way to go, honestly. Okay, moving on to kind of a in-between, okay? So this is the highly minimalist. So this is, they consider a minimalist shoe, and you can obviously see the difference from one minimalist to another. You can see that this one has more cushion, okay? It's definitely harder on the bottom, okay? But this one actually has no heel drop, but that's for the fact that these shoes, and I have a picture of it that I'll show you all here in a second, they come with 3 different insoles. This is the minimalist insole. So this one has a 0 millimeter toe drop with a 0 arch, or a 10 millimeter arch, I apologize. And then the other insoles that they have, one will have a 4 millimeter heel to toe drop, and then the other one will have a 6 millimeter heel to toe drop. So it's okay when I want to do my basic weight training, then the next heel or the insole is for cross training, and then the next sole is more for your running kind of thing. What's nice about these compared to these is they're considered a minimalist, but they're a little bit more, like, I mean, way less flexible, right? So you're sticking yourself in that cast again, but they're at least flat to the ground. So one of the things I forgot to mention with these big, thick heels is even though we're taking that stress off the Achilles and off the calf, we're shortening the Achilles and we're shortening the calf. So if something happens where, God forbid, you're not in the pair of shoes that actually has that good, you know, heel lift in it, an injury might happen. I promise you, if you are ever consistently training in these kinds of shoes, the first day that maybe you go to a yoga class and you try to do a downward dog, you're going to feel an intense stretch all the way up your calf, all the way down your Achilles, because you've shortened it for, not you, but just in general, like, have shortened it over a long period of time. That was something that very much happened to me because, I mean, for the longest time, you know, my kind of shoes are like Air Maxes and all this kind of stuff. And I mean, just look at this gummy. I mean, I bet you this is like a 25, you know, heel to toe drop. But that's because that was what was built back in the day, right? I think Air Maxes are still popular, actually. I just don't care about being cool anymore. But what that does is that elevation is going to shorten all that stuff. And if you just hop all of a sudden in a minimalist shoe and you go out for a long, long run, injury is most likely going to happen because you haven't given your body a time to adapt to increasing the length of that. I'm in the opinion as a strength and conditioning coach and fitness professional that you should use your joints how they're meant to be used. Okay, they are the prerequisites to movement. If you don't have an ankle that has full range of motion, if you don't have a shoulder that has full range of motion, then you technically don't have an ankle and you don't have a shoulder, and you shouldn't be doing activities that stress those joints until you can optimize it. And that's something that happens from consistently training in certain types of shoes, which is why it's good to, you know, vary yourself up or be as barefoot as often as possible. So the in-between, right, this, you could definitely consider this, this is definitely a cross trainer, right? Harder, less flexible, good for the gym, can still do runs in them. Really cool that they have the different soles in them, which I will try to bring up another picture, I think. Let me get it up real quick. Oh, there it is, okay. I apologize, this screen is just so far away from me that it's kind of hard to see. So here is Highleat's website. Here's that shoe, and what you can see, please excuse my slow computer as I try to scroll down. What we'll do is, as it does scroll down, you'll see that they have all these different heels and or insoles, right? And you can see that each one has a different toed heel drop. I can't read them from here. I believe this one is the 0 millimeters. I think it's 10 millimeters to 10 millimeters. This one's 14 millimeters to 10, so it's a 4 millimeter toed heel drop. You have a little bit more of an arch. This one doesn't have an arch in it. And then this one's going to be the biggest one. And that's for, again, lift, train, kind of like cross train and run. That's their whole concept behind it. Honestly, I wasn't the biggest fan of these after I got them. I thought they were going to be way more minimalist-like. But with a cool look to them, because they definitely do look cooler than these. But it wasn't everything I exactly wanted, so I honestly still, I don't use these that much. A lot of people love them, though. Okay. So what we're going to talk about now is what we call Olympic lifting shoes. And these are like the most expensive pair of shoes that you're going to be seeing in the gym, okay? And when you see somebody in a like dumbbell rack doing bicep curls wearing these, they have no idea what these shoes are for, and that person should be slapped. Unless they just got done, they shouldn't be slapped. I'm kidding. They just don't know. But it means that unless they just got done Olympic lifting. But what this is as you can see, this is a very, very heavy shoe. I actually like the heaviest of all Olympic lifting shoes, and these Reeboks are the heaviest ones. But you can see that these have a huge heel rise, okay? And that's one of the points of these shoes, okay? So what I'm going to show you first is I'm going to show you a video of what Olympic lifting is, and then we'll be able to kind of break down why these shoes are important for it. So it's on this same thing, but we're going to, okay. So this is Olympic lifting. I'm sorry if you know what Olympic lifting is. Some people don't. This is one of my favorite lifters. This is Maddie Rogers. She's not wearing these exact brand, but I believe she is wearing some of the Nike. So what she is performing is an exercise called the snatch, okay? And we'll just talk about the first thing of where these shoes really come into play. She has beautiful technique. So let's go right around here. Maybe back a little bit farther. So if we look at how deep of a squat that she is in, it is very, very difficult with this kind of weight overhead to be able to maintain that heel on the ground and keep our foot in a safe position. So one of the things that is very important for Olympic lifting shoes is purposefully having this elevated heel, okay? And that is to have proper mechanics in a very explosive exercise like the clean or like the snatch, which you just saw, or the clean and jerk, which we didn't see, but the clean and jerk, you would be ending in a very deep front squat position. And a lot of times people are going to get heavy weights and they're going to be moving forward and they would fall forward a little bit, putting a lot of stress on their feet. This really helps compensate for it. Any Olympic lifter will tell you, and I'm an Olympic lifter myself, that you should not only squat in these shoes though. You should squat in these shoes and you should squat out of these shoes. You should not solely rely on these. Because this, again, is greatly going to shorten, and we do tons of ankle mobility drills and all this kind of stuff, because you actually have to have huge amounts of ankle mobility and hip mobility in Olympic lifting. But this shortens the range of motion that your ankle has to go through to land in that safe, sturdy position, okay? Another thing about these shoes is they are extremely hard on the bottom. And that's where, if you see at the beginning of that lift, she's literally, we call it push the ground away in Olympic lifting. So the first motion that you're doing through the first and second pull, we're not going to break down the clean and snatch, that would take way too long, is you're pushing the ground away. Now, if you have something that's like a real cushy light surface, that's going to sink into the ground, especially if you're lifting a heavy amount of weight, and the movements themselves are very ballistic and explosive. So this allows for no slack to take place as you're pushing up. Then for the fact that it's so hard and so flat on the bottom, when you do an Olympic lift, everyone thinks, well, people that aren't Olympic lifting, they think that you jump when you're Olympic lifting, but you just actually lift your feet. And as you kind of come up and you lift your feet, that flat bottom allows you to have a real, like, you are listening for an audible clap of when your feet hit the plywood or the platform when you're doing an Olympic lift, and that lets you know that you're landing flat-footed, and it's very stable and it's very secure. I like the heavier ones. There's definitely a range of like lighter to heavier Olympic lifting shoes, because these ones make me feel like it sucks me back down to the ground. Okay. There's other things that are very intricate to Olympic lifting when it comes to the shoes, but the two big ones is this big heel to be able to help limit that range of motion that you need, but that does not mean you should not have ankle mobility if you're an Olympic lifter, and also this hard surface to allow for that push into the ground and that sturdy, safe landing position that you're going to go through. Like when I wear these in the gym, like if I have to like when I warm up, I'll literally be, you know, in these the whole time, and then I carry these with me to the platform and then I change into them. If I have to like go get a drink of water or something, I literally feel like I'm in heels wearing these because they're so high. I'm literally kind of walking with my butt shaking and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of funny. They're very awkward to walk in. They are not mechanically sound for how your foot is supposed to work. These are 100% a tool for a certain thing. Now, Olympic lifters will do what's called an Olympic squat, and they will lift in these, you know, with their back squat, especially that high bar squat. And your power lifters, a lot of the time, most of the time, will lift in these as well. And that's because, you know, again, strong on the bottom, high heel, it allows you to push more weight. But any strength and conditioning coach is going to tell you should also squat in barefoot if you can, or in other shoes to be able to help build that range of motion. You shouldn't be doing it in like the minimalist if you don't have the proper range of motion. Earn the range of motion first and then go to the squat, right? If you don't have an ankle, don't do the squat. You need to earn the joint before you can do the movement. So these, I mean, they're stupid expensive. These cost me $200, right? But there's something I use. I am an Olympic lifter, so that's the way I train. So very, very essential to have. You can Olympic lift in other shoes, but once you put these on the first time, it's a game changer. You're never going to lift again without them. So just real quick, some kind of things that maybe a lot of you have been seeing when going to the gyms and stuff recently is you might see a lot of the power lifters all of a sudden wearing wrestling shoes. Okay, it's been going. Man, mine are so dirty. I used to use these way back in the day in wrestling, right? I didn't wrestle, but we had never mind, long story, but these are just dirty. But they've been used in powerlifting for some time, but they're getting super popular now. And the concept from using these is very similar to the concept of using minimalists, is they are flat to the ground. Wrestling shoes are nice and grippy, which if you're deadlifting on more of a slippery surface, that's really nice. And they have a flat sole, which makes it nice and easy. And they're a little bit more flexible, right? A little bit high ankle support, obviously, which some people may like. I prefer, honestly, to have that low ankle support, so I have to rely on myself. If I can deadlift barefoot, that's the way it's going to go. Most power lifters, if they're not in competitions or training, they're going to tell you that they're going to lift barefoot as well. So you may be seeing this a lot with your power lifters. It's mainly for, that flat bottom, the grippiness, and then also just kind of like that kind of minimalist feel if they can't lift in their socks or something like that. Then just to kind of bring up the basketball shoes, right? And you can think about this with cleats and all that stuff as well. Your basketball shoes should be stiff as crap, right? You're doing extremely ballistic movements on the court. You want a good high ankle support, the best that you can, right? Obviously, Jordan's gonna, they have good ones out there. They don't actually have a huge heel to toe drop either, right? And that's because you don't want to be up like this when you're playing basketball. But you can see how sturdy these things are, right? And it's because you want your foot as compact and as stiff as possible in there. You don't want to roll your ankle. Like if I'm trying to hoop in these, I'm going to break. It's not going to work. It would be terrible. So, you know, your cleats, your basketball shoes, you definitely want a sturdy, good grippy bottom, usually higher ankle support. Some people like the real high ankle support. I don't have bad ankles, luckily, even though I've broken one. It healed really well that I don't have to deal with that. Other things, I think I have them in here, that you see probably a lot too, is your power lifters using the Chuck Taylors, right? This has been something that's been going on for a millennia, right? And this again has to deal with that big flat surface. There's not a big heel to toe drop here. And this is real sturdy again, right? So it protects that foot and gives you a lot of like stuff that you can push back on. I'm not a big fan of lifting in Chuck Taylors. I know a ton of people do it. I have no beef with it. I'm just more of that minimalist kind of guy and barefoot kind of guy. At the end of the day, as we all know, it all comes back to bow nose. So if you have your old school pair of Bo Jacksons, which yes, I still do, these are what make you a true athlete. That's 100% lie. These are horrible to train in, but they are dope, and I love Bo, so bow nose. With that, that's all I really have for this webinar. So if we have any questions, I'd be willing to answer the ones that I know the answers to.
So yeah, leave your questions in the chat box. I know we already have some posted. So I saw one here, yeah, about transitioning from a normal shoe to the less support system of a minimalist shoe. I know you talked about that a little bit. How it's difficult. Aaron, if he hasn't answered your question, please let me know. We can sort of circle back to that. I also seen another one. So how do you go about finding quality shoes? Aaron says that they usually Google best running shoes or listen to Runner's World Top 10. So how do you find quality shoes?
So the best way, so let's give it for an example for like a running shoe. The best way to find a quality shoe, like, I mean, I go down the rabbit holes like on YouTube, like top 10 snowboards, top 10 this, right? Those things are not specific to you per se, right? Though that information is good and you can learn the science and the mechanisms behind them. But for a running shoe, there's tons of shops out there that you can go and they'll have you hop on a treadmill. They'll watch what your gait pattern is. They'll look at the shape of your foot, and they can either get real expensive, right, and design a shoe and an insole specifically to you, or see what you're doing and find a shoe that best fits kind of your mechanics. The thing that you don't want to happen is if you have bad mechanics, it doesn't mean that, oh, I can get this shoe to handle my bad mechanics. You should try to fix those the best that you can, right? You should try to fix all the imbalances or the asymmetries or the dysfunctions that you possibly have. But you shouldn't just put yourself in a shoe that's not going to support that in the time being where it may cause injury, right? So finding out first what your faults are, finding a shoe that best fits those faults, and then trying to find the best strategy to be able to implement to be able to correct those faults. Then the next way to find like a good shoe for you is what are you going for, right? Are you like, you know, running extreme marathons, right? If you are a pavement runner that's running long distance at a time, you're going to want one of those shoes with a much thicker sole, right? Much more cushion because you're having much more impact on the ground. These ain't going to work. I mean, you can get them to work, but it's going to damage your performance, right? You're going to get, we've all seen with these new shoes that are coming out with the big, thick soles and stuff that numbers are being broken, times are being broken. It completely shows that it does help in performance, but does it help in function of how the body naturally works is the question that I'm posing, right? It shows that it doesn't. So again, you looking at the shoe as a tool, if this shoe does good for X result and that's the performance that you're doing, utilize it for that, but only use it as the tool and not everything that you do. I think the best way that I can probably say it is use your performance shoe when you're doing your performance task and then be as barefoot as possible as much as often. And your everyday shoes, try to have them as minimalist as possible. I get that a lot of us are in work where we have to wear dress shoes and all that kind of stuff. You have to do what you have to do there, but if you can kick your shoes off in your office and let those feet splay out, let those toes splay out, it's the best way to go. Honestly, I had, well, still have an issue with, my toes being smushed together. They're a lot better now. I've been doing a lot of work on them lately. My buddy John would be very happy with that. But I even got I don't know if you've ever got a pedicure where they put like your little toes in spacers. I literally put those spacers in between my toes all day to try to help stretch all that out now, because I was getting cramps in my feet just like walking around, or like if I was in a half kneeling position trying to like flex at the knee, my whole foot would cramp, and I'm like, that's not supposed to happen. And I'm building my arches and all that stuff back up right now. But if you have a certain task that you do, you want to you're going to research, listen to the pros out there, listen to the scientists out there that understand that sport, but understand that shoe is a tool for that performance. Then you need to reconsider, is that shoe how a proper foot actually works? And like I said, just go out one day on like a grassy field and just run barefoot and see how you run, and then put shoes on and then run with that and see the difference of how like your foot strikes and all that takes place.
Awesome. Now someone else wants to know, how do they know what amount of arch support they would need, and where could they find out?
So you can, what's the foot, like the podiatrist, they can do, so even some running stores can do this too. You can identify what your arch looks like, and this is a super cheesy way to do it. This is not like the medical way to do it, but you can identify how flat or how high your arches are if you want to yourself identify what kind of arch maybe you need if you don't want to go to the doctors and get like the arches looked at and all that. But if you put like a piece of black paper on the ground and you have some chalk, put your foot in the chalk and then step it on the ground. And you'll see if you're flat foot, you're going to see a flat foot right across the ground. If you have a medium arch, you'll see that it's a little bit darker right there. If you have a high arch, you'll see a nice black spot across that piece of the paper where the chalk didn't touch the ground. And that's going to let you know, not perfectly, but kind of a little bit of what your arches are like. And then you can kind of go and see kind of shoes that maybe have a high arch, maybe ones that are a little bit more flat feet. But some stores out there, like again, most stores that have like athletic shoes in them that are geared towards shoes, not like a Foot Locker or something like that, but like an actual store geared towards like running shoes, they'll have people that can go in there and look at that stuff. And then obviously, your foot specialists and doctors are going to be able to identify what kind of arch support you would need as well. Because some people need orthotics, right? Some people you need to go to a doctor. You need specific orthotics for your feet, and it's what you have to do to either support your arch or build it back up. So usually you want to rely on the professionals best for that, especially if you're having some issues in your arches. It's not something like me, a strength conditioning coach, and like, oh, you need 40% for your arch. You need to talk to more of a specialist for it.
Similarly, we have someone asking for advice. So she says she has a high arch and runs heel to toe. She always wears shoes with medium to high cushion, like Brooks custom insoles. But sometimes when running or even stationary, her ankle and sometimes knees hurt. Do you have any suggestions?
I would highly suggest to start working your mobility barefoot the best you can, and starting it very, very slow. Without me being able to grab your foot, move it around, see how everything articulates and do certain assessments, I'm not going to know if inversion's a problem, eversion's a problem, dorsiflexion, like where are we limited at? But most likely you have some sort of active range of motion problem going on there. I would suggest, if you are having the pain, continue utilizing those, still thick shoes, because if you start coming down a little bit, it's going to hurt a lot more. So, wait for that. But if you want a good place to start, and if you, I don't know if I can do this. I can support other people. There's a business called The Ready State, and it's done by this guy named Kelly Starrett. He wrote a book called Becoming a Supple Leper. He's a big mobility wizard. He's like literally one of my heroes out there. Very, 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 very smart when it comes to mobility and how to be able to reestablish proper movement patterns. They have a whole online system now. It used to be called Mobility Wad, but now it's called The Ready State. Again, that's called The Ready State by Kelly Starrett. It goes by K-Star. Where you can literally submit an assessment of yourself and various other things, and they'll be able to help walk you through a protocol to be able to reestablish proper movement and proper mobility and help fix dysfunctional patterns. But most likely, you have something going on at the ankle, also possibly at the hip. which is causing a little bit more stress to take place down in that kind of region. Moving that ankle when it's barefoot, not in like a high impact workout kind of way, but through natural ranges of motion with some mobility drills, whether it be like knee dives or just some basics of honestly just doing rotational stuff while really just focusing on your ankle can help all that kind of stuff. But you might have had, shortened up that Achilles quite a bit. You might have shortened up your calf quite a bit. It's very hard to say without being there and manipulating these kinds of things. But I have found a lot of great value with the individuals that I have told to go, hey, check out the Ready State and see what this X, Y, and Z with your shoulder. And you get like a whole prescription of exercises that you can do that can help with your problem. And it's not like you just saying, oh, this is my issue. They're going to take you through certain assessments and then they're going to assess it and then give you some information to be able to do. But the easiest way to start, look up ankle mobility drills, okay, online, do like 2 or 3 and then kind of walk around, see how it feels. If it feels a little bit better, oh, that might be one that you want to stick with and then kind of work that way a little bit. Typically, individuals have poor dorsiflexion, which dorsiflexion is like if this is the top of my foot and like this is my shin, this is dorsiflexion, right? And a lot of people, since they have like a really shortened Achilles, that dorsiflexion is very, very, very limited, especially if we're consistently heel striking, right? We're not trying to get into proper mechanics. So a way to be able, if this is my ankle, to start stretching it. Like this is my ankle, this is my leg, to start moving it in this direction. And then also out to the side of it, and then to the end of it, while always maintaining that heel on the ground and doing various different things like that. You can also, we don't have enough room in here for the camera work, but you can grab like a band like this and say, I have my ankle here. So what I would do is I would wrap this around my ankle and it would be attached to something, and then I would go into dorsiflexion, right? And what that's doing is as I go into dorsiflexion, the band is pulling my ankle back. This is a really difficult way to do it. Let me move these real quick. So again, I would be here. This is attached to something. I would go into dorsiflexion, maintain that heel on the ground. This is pulling it back even farther, and it can really help with that kind of stuff. That's called banded distraction.
All right, awesome. I think this is the last question. So what would you recommend for a walking shoe?
I like to walk in the Minimalist, honestly, just because it's that natural state of the foot, but it's not, I don't have to feel the super cold on the ground, right? I don't have to feel all the pebbles scratching me up and all that kind of stuff. So my everyday wears, for the most part, are my Minimalists. I've been kind of being lazy and wearing these a lot lately just because they're a little bit more fashionable. But anything that you can get that's going to be the purest form of how your foot naturally works for your everyday walking shoes, since that's not super high impact, would be a great way to go. You're most likely not going to get super hardcore overuse injuries. If you are feeling like, if you do take very long walks, start, with that Minimalist a little bit shorter and then build yourself up. You might be a little bit sore at first, right? Again, you're taking your foot and you're putting it in something that's way less stable than it's used to. It's not used to having to work in that way. So just expect a little bit of a what's it called, of a learning curve, right? It was so funny because when the whole thing happened to the 5-finger shoes, because back in the day I was all about the style of shoes. I'm like, oh, I don't care what shoes do, I care about what they look like, because I was just a meathead like that. And I was so pumped when I heard that those Vibram shoes got in trouble and they got sued because people were getting injured. I'm like, see, I knew that they weren't right. And then it just turns out that people just jumped the gun with it. They just jumped into it way too fast. If those shoes, if I just didn't hate the look of them, and I don't, if you wear them, that more power to you. They are the best Minimalists that you can get out there, because then you actually get the movement with your toes as well. But anything, even one of these as a Minimalist, right? It's going to be good for your everyday walking shoe, right? But when you're around the house, really try to walk around as barefoot as possible, right? Try to let your foot breathe and move the way that it really should. And it's going to take some time. I've been doing, one of my main focuses when quarantine and the whole lockdown started was to really start putting work into my feet, because I ignored them for so long. I think it happened one day because when I was a little kid, I was at like 7th grade. I went to a party at like a birthday party at my friend Pete Tarr's house, and I took my shoes off and my feet stunk real bad that day. And so after that, like, I always wanted to wear shoes because I was embarrassed. So then I constantly wear shoes all the time, and I just smushed my feet so bad. So it's been a long process, but I can't tell you. You have to think everything starts from the ground, like that. The ground up, really what's happening. If you can't use your feet properly, if your feet and your ankles don't work properly, that's going to work itself up the kinetic chain and cause issues all over the place. So it's really important to kind of get that down.
Awesome, thank you. I don't see any more questions, so I think that's it. Thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you Ramon for presenting. That was really interesting, really informative. I think it's something that not a lot of people think about all the time, so thank you all, and I hope that
Andrea, when is our next webinar? When is the Boost Your Immune?
So
it's in
we
December,
have,
correct?
yes, we have another webinar with Ramon, so if you like this one, join us December 2nd. You can sign up at connections.wsu.edu. It's called Boost the Immune. So yeah, ways to boost your immune system, super relevant for everything that's going on today. So hope you can join us for that one. We also have other events before that going on. You can find all of those at the Connections website. So thank you everyone, and have a great night.
Thanks everyone.